What up, Cavs Nation? I'm your host, Ethan Sands, and I'm back with another episode of the Wine and Gold Talk podcast. And today's episode will be the beautiful beginning of a new series where we're going to have conversations around the NBA and talk to the beat reporters who have lived with these teams every single day. And we're starting with one of the biggest and most intriguing franchises in all of sports. And our first guest for this series is going to discuss the Los Angeles Lakers as the beat reporter for the Orange County Registry. Ben Royer. Ben, you're covering the end of the LeBron James era, the beginning of the Luka Doncic era in LA, and a Lakers roster that looks dramatically different than the championship roster that they had a few years ago. And now we also have the conversation about what's happening at an ownership level. So there's a lot to get into. But as this is a Cavs podcast at its core, we have to start with Cleveland's hero, LeBron James. What has the summer been like, especially as LeBron announced that he was going to end his tenure with the Los Angeles Lakers? So they had the opportunity to pivot, right? They were to make their moves and their adjustments throughout the summer, knowing that LeBron James wasn't going to be on the roster and not having to second guess what that could look like. They went out and got Walker Kessler. They added Colin Sexton, Sandra Mamu, Kevon Looney. What did LeBron James leaving the Lakers do for their offseason and how they moved and made some interesting moves when it comes to around the margins this offseason?
As you know, Ethan, being a part of the reporting on the Cleveland, Philadelphia, Miami, anyone who LeBron was necessarily thinking about going to, cap space was always going to be a big question, and the veteran minimum of it all was a big part of that. The Lakers were a team that could give LeBron 20 to 30 million on the open market still, which I found to be pretty fascinating when considering what LeBron's decision was going to be. So when he did say from the get-go, hey, I'm not coming back. And, of course, when that news happens, you're where you don't want to be at all times. I was on a bus and I got the Shams notification and it's like, oh my God, I have to reach out to Rich Paul right now. You have that brain part of your life going, but it allowed the Lakers to kind of open up and decide, what does the future look like now? We have a lot of money to spend. They knew they wanted to commit themselves to Austin Reeves, which they did the very first move they did in the offseason. And of course, that was one of the last moves announced, but that's because they had the financial flexibility outside of Austin to figure out what it was going to look like otherwise. I think losing LeBron makes a big question of, who's like the power forward on the Lakers, weirdly enough. Like, who's that guy that's the muscle on the team, which is weird to say about LeBron at his age, but LeBron was a guy who was forcing his way into the paint for rebounds late in the season. He was doing hustle plays. He was working really hard. And how do you replicate and change things? I think the Lakers have chosen a group of really high upside guys. I don't think on very team-friendly contracts, considering the amount of player options they've given out. But I do think looking at a guy like Quentin Grimes, for example, I mean, he's shown flashes of what he can be. But then there's the question of, can Quentin Grimes be that point of attack defender? He said since being signed that he'd be interested in trying to make that work, develop himself more defensively and become that guy. But is that who he is going to be? As Ethan, a guy like Colin Sexton has shown flashes of being a premier scorer in the NBA, but the rest of it is still a big question mark. I think, if anything, that might be the contract the Lakers are most thrilled to have, because he's going to get a lot more open looks with Luka and Austin on the floor with him. And then, adding a Kevon Looney, I think the Lakers, if in an ideal world, would prefer to have a better backup five, and maybe they'll still look to find one. But Walker Kessler being your starting center, and I know a lot of Lakers fans have thought about this as, using all your draft capital, or even the people in the league, wow, that's a lot to give up for Walker Kessler. But if you don't do it, I think that was the thing, on Rob Pelinka's mind maybe, is like, if you don't make that acquisition, then you're setting yourself up for a season that's not going to be very friendly. You needed a big center. Luka wanted a center, and they got that center in Walker Kessler. Now, the big question is, does Walker Kessler stay healthy? We need to see that in reality. But, you look at the roster, it's going to be one of the best offensive teams in the NBA. The rest of it, I think, is still a big question mark.
I think that's a good point, especially because obviously we understand, especially in Cleveland, there's two sides of the ball, and you have someone who's able to take over a possession on every given play when it comes to a guy in Cleveland like James Harden or Donovan Mitchell, but also Luka Doncic, obviously, in Los Angeles. And we have the understanding of how good Luka Doncic is and where he ranks when it comes to the league itself, and probably being a top 5, top 10 player in the NBA currently. So I think the next portion of this, the next part of this question goes into the era of Luka Doncic basketball, right? Because in Dallas, they were building around him entirely. And now they're kind of doing the same in Los Angeles and how they're looking at building and retooling the roster and what that takes to be a better team surrounding Luka Doncic, right? And not necessarily having other players who need the ball in their hands to be successful, trying to find guys that can create and all these things. But we know what comes with being the face of a franchise. Donovan Mitchell is the face of a franchise. He's the leader, right? In Los Angeles, it's a little bit different. There's a little bit more that it entails to be the face of a franchise. Kobe Bryant wore that burden for 20 years, right? Shaquille O'Neal was there as well, but it was still Kobe's team, right? And that's kind of the dichotomy of the situation that was going on with LeBron and Luka. Like they want to share it together, but there can only really be one face. Do you feel like Luka is the perfect player for the Lakers to build this next era of this franchise around? And why is he so perfect to be a franchise face?
I think that's an interesting question. And you look at the demographics of Los Angeles sports stars right now, and I think you find a really interesting thing. LAFC, the MLS club, their best player is Son, Korean. The Los Angeles is a large Korean community. You look at the Dodgers with Shohei Ohtani and the amount of Japanese and Asian influx of talent that they have. And then you go to the Lakers, and the Lakers have had international stars. I mean, I think Pau Gasol is still one of the most popular people you'll find in Los Angeles. However, I think Luka has an opportunity to kind of build the Lakers' international footprint larger than it already was. And of course, ownership is already starting to change with the Lakers again. But when Lon Rosen, who's I would feel comfortable saying is very much a right-hand man of Mark Walter, he was involved with the Dodgers, Mark Walter owns, and then with the Lakers, which Mark Walter is now selling after owning them for less than a year officially. Lon Rosen, I asked him like, "Oh, what about Luka allows like the marketing, the business side of the Lakers to grow?" And it's like the possibilities are endless. You have a guy with so much international footprint, that goes to sponsorships, that goes to advertising, all these different things. And Luka has that aspect to him. One, he's a phenomenal basketball player. His jersey prints money, and that's a big part of being a star, I think. People already in Los Angeles are wearing Luka jerseys everywhere. I think he has number one, he's already got that aspect. He's got the skill to back it up. But then, as you know, with being a star in Los Angeles or New York market, the rest of it comes. There's expectations. There's increased media pressure. There are people snooping around details of your life a little bit more. And of course, Luka's having a very public off the court situation currently. And I don't know if that happens if he's still in Dallas, if it's a very public thing. It might be a footnote, but it might not be the very public thing that we're seeing right now. I do think he's the perfect star for the Lakers because I don't think the Lakers, and people might get angry at me for saying this, but the Lakers are not the Lakers of 15 years ago. They are a different franchise at this point in time. Or, when you look at the Lakers and Dodgers, when the Lakers were last really, really good, the Dodgers were in their period of middling success. They were in their period of ownership turmoil. They were in their period of, we don't know if we can afford the guys on our team. The Lakers are now in a place where they can't afford it. Okay. They built a team that's seemingly with the idea of we want to compete with the Spurs and Thunder. Now, the question is that possible? We'll have to see. But Luka is that guy I'd want leading the charge. But that also is asking him to be a leader. It's asking him to refine the other side of his game, which I think is defensively, and he showed sparks of that in February and March of this last season. And what does that mean for the future? Luka's only committed for so long. And if this doesn't work out this year, does that create questions? I think every other team in the NBA would love a Luka Doncic. So yes, Luka's the star, but there are still a lot of questions that needs to be answered. I think before Los Angeles might be comfortable saying, yes, Luka is the star of the Lakers in the same way that a Kobe or a Magic or a LeBron took the mantle.
Yeah, or Kareem, obviously, right?
Yeah.
But I do think it's important to talk more about the impact of the limelight Los Angeles has, right? Because as you pointed out, you're in this different level of public eye than arguably anywhere else in the world, right? Maybe New York. But there is this understanding of you kind of have an idea of who these people might be, who these NBA players might be, but their private life can still be private. Luka Doncic doesn't necessarily have that luxury anymore. LeBron James hasn't had that luxury since he was 18 years old. But when we talk about coming into an organization where you now have to step into a bigger spotlight, a bigger opportunity, a bigger chance at winning a championship and being in front of fans and all these things. What have you learned about Luka Doncic and how he handles these situations? Because we've seen the fun, happy-go-lucky kid that likes to drink beer and after winning games or whatever. But when you get to know a person, and especially because their information in their life is so publicized, is there a way for you to learn more about the person himself away from all of that? And what have you learned that you don't think people outside of the Lakers really understand just yet about Luka Doncic?
You know, it's interesting. I think people know that basketball players, athletes, etc., want to win no matter what. It's like how me and you want to be the best journalists we can be. No matter what you do in your life, you're going to commit yourself to doing it as hard as possible. I also have the belief of people that want a job really work hard for that job. When I say I want to shoot for the stars, it means I'm going to grind every day to get there. I think Luka is naturally built with that mentality in a really fascinating way. He's definitely a quieter leader than a LeBron James. I think a LeBron James is a rally the troops leader. And interestingly enough, I think Austin Reeves is also a quiet leader. I'm currently working on a story about how Austin's voice is, growing, I think. And that comes with becoming a veteran guy on a team. Which is weird to say about Austin Reeves, who I still imagine as like a new guy on the Lakers. But Luka is very much a quiet, I'm going to work every single day to be the best at this one thing. In February and March, when Luka started really becoming a point of attack defender when Marcus Smart was off the floor for the Lakers, he was like, I'm going to be as good defensively as possible. And, he'd chuckle a little bit when someone would ask about his defense. He's like, oh, now you guys are asking about my defense? But I think he comes with that little, I think it's easy to laugh when he says something funny. He's a very sarcastic individual, but he works so hard at it. And you'd hope that from your stars. I think, again, with the LA limelight and pressure, some people handle it differently than others. I think it helps he didn't grow up on the high school BYBL circuit in America. I think that is built-in pressure from the second that you start playing a sport. There is pressure in Europe, playing as a teenager on Real Madrid. That is pressure. However, there's not the same eyes on it. There's not the same social media backlash on it. Luka, I don't think, was built for an era where guys finish the game and they go straight to Twitter or they go straight to Instagram and they see what people think about them. I don't think Luka cares. I think Luka just wants to win. And I think that says a lot about how Luka is. And I think it says a lot about Austin too. Austin Reeves doesn't run his own social media. So it's like these guys, I think, are so focused on winning, where a lot of guys are still so instead focused on their public brand image. I think you want your leaders to be guys that are trying their hardest on and off the court to be the best they can. And Luka is one of those guys for certain. I think some fans might see that, but I think also fans see a guy that jokes around and they might be, why is he relaxing? I mean, if you see Luka, the photos of Luka in Slovenia with his teammates right now, it's like an unrecognizable Luka from when he first got to the Lakers. The guy is in shape, he is ready to play, and he knows his role on the team is to be the leader.
I think that's well said, especially because we don't get that perspective so often when it comes to Luka, especially because of the already known perception from his Dallas days and now trying to figure out who he is in Los Angeles. Obviously, he's dealing with his own things. I just think there's so many different misconceptions about players in the NBA, also just teams in the NBA as well. But I do want to, because of course we have to touch on the actual basketball of this situation. I feel like with all the changes that have been happening with the Los Angeles Lakers, this is kind of a reality check season with where they are because of the question, how good are the Lakers actually going to be this coming year, right? Because you have the hierarchy of the Western Conference, which is always a juggernaut, always a gauntlet to run, with Oklahoma City, San Antonio, Denver, Minnesota got better this offseason. Those are the consistent top dogs of that food chain. So when you're thinking about this new iteration, can they realistically be a championship contender this year? Or do you think this is the reality of year one of a larger Luka-centric build, especially because you mentioned Luka Doncic's contract situation? If he doesn't get extended, that could play into how they look at their championship window.
I think, one, it's worth noting that I'm not sure the Lakers would try to move on from Luka. I think it would be a Luka moving on from the Lakers if that were to happen. Or a team comes in and says, hey, it's not going well with Luka in LA. Let's try and jump on this opportunity while we can. I see this version of a Lakers team right now, and I don't like doing predictions games, and it's not my mindset. But I see this team probably finishing in a 4 or 5 seed in the West. Again, you mentioned it. I mean, Oklahoma City and I think San Antonio are such gauntlets of teams. Even last year, I watched the Lakers play the Thunder 6 times after I started the job, 2 in the regular season and 4 in the playoffs. There was just such a gulf in quality between the two teams. I even asked Austin Reeves after they were eliminated in the playoffs. Someone had asked the question. I'm still writing a gamer. I'm not writing. I did have my end of season article, but I still had to write my gamer on the night. And it was just like, he basically said, and pardon my language, it's like we were shit. That's what Austin said to me. And it's like, yes. I mean, I think that's how most fans saw it. Like in comparison between the Thunder and Lakers and how those teams were built, the health of both teams. I think the Lakers are in a position, though, where they're more championship ceiling, however, at this moment. Luka is the face. Any team with Luka in the playoffs, I like their chances. We have not really been able to see Luka full flesh. When Luka first arrived, the Lakers were still figuring out how LeBron and Luka played together. In the second year, Luka doesn't even get to play in the playoffs. Now this is Luka's opportunity. Luka's opportunity to put his stamp in Los Angeles and say, I'm the guy that will lead this team to victory. Do I think they match up well against a lot of these teams in the West? We're going to have to see. I think I'm comfortable saying they're better than a Houston. They're better than a Phoenix. But that's like the ones you're expected to be better than if you're the Lakers. Are they better than the Timberwolves right now with adding LaMelo? I don't know. We're gonna have to see what these matchups look like. When I look to the NBA schedule and see how the schedule matched up, one early in the season where they spend 4 days in Minnesota, play them twice, and then at the end of the season, Minnesota comes to Los Angeles for 4 days. I kind of love that mini playoff series mentality, and I think we'll learn a lot about both teams in that first matchup to see, are the Lakers better than the Timberwolves? Are they better than the Nuggets? But I think the Lakers did show against the Nuggets last year that, the Lakers can handle that. And the Lakers were playing a lot of Jake LaRavia minutes then. They were playing a lot of Marcus Smart minutes, and those were guys that are more defensive minded, and they were still getting the job done. Can the Lakers be defensive minded against Denver? Can they be defensive minded into the regular season? I think JJ Redick has his work cut out for him, but I think it's also worth noting where the roster changed a lot, the coaching staff did not. And consistency breeds excellence, I think, in every job, every organization, especially when the expectation is success and you've shown ability to create success so far. I'm curious to see how JJ Redick helps maybe raise the ceiling of this team. So you could maybe say by the end of the season, they're in a series with the Thunder. Maybe they can get a game or two. I don't know if they can win the series, but maybe a game or two.
Since you brought him up, I don't think we can just move on without talking about JJ Redick, right? One of the biggest personalities that is in the Lakers
Oh, for
organization now
sure.
because of how he came up throughout the league, how respected he is, how respected his game was, and then also just his knowledge about the game, right? And obviously, it helps that he's kind of a psycho, right? So everybody is a little bit tempted to see what they can pry and prod out of him because that's who JJ Redick is. So when you talk about working alongside or working with or talking to a former player turned coach who is so entrenched and enthralled by the work, the film aspect of being a coach, and then seeing it play out in his ATOs, seeing it play out in his work with his players, right? I think it's interesting because I don't know necessarily if JJ Redick is a similar coach to Kenny Atkinson because Kenny Atkinson for the Cavs is so philosophically enthused, while JJ Redick is, I'm going to go to watch it, go put the work in and figure it out and adjust on the fly based on that or based on whatever the results tell me. What have you learned? What have you seen when it comes to JJ Redick and obviously your first year on the beat, but how he's growing as a coach throughout this entire process? And obviously, as we've talked about at length on this podcast already, just being in Los Angeles and having that pressure placed on you, on top of having to coach two of the best players, maybe the best player of all time in LeBron James and Luka Doncic, one of the best players in the league right now, to then be in competition to win a championship as well.
Yeah, it's an interesting idea. It's so funny to me being a young guy on a beat, and 3 of the people that I cover the Lakers with day in and day out covered JJ Redick when he was on the Clippers and was around him a lot as a player. And I think it's so interesting how their relationships have evolved as reporter to player, to now reporter to coach. It's just such a fascinating landscape and how things change over years. I think one thing that I've been really impressed with JJ, and I think this is something he's quickly learning, is is how to get the best out of his players. I think he sets very high expectations for his team. There are a lot of people like to rag on DeAndre Ayton. He got a lot out of DeAndre Ayton at the value they got him at. DeAndre Ayton was not a perfect center for the Lakers by any means, but he knew how to push the right buttons and get DeAndre playing at the right time. In the Houston series, first round, DeAndre Ayton was a menace on the offensive glass. That is something that the Lakers really badly needed, and I credit JJ Redick a lot for being able to help get that out of DeAndre Ayton. How he's handled Bronny James, for example, is a big thing. He made it very clear to LeBron when they first got Bronny. Bronny and JJ showed up at the same time practically with the Lakers. And he told LeBron, I'm not coaching LeBron's son, I'm coaching Bronny James. And I'm gonna make him the best player he can be. And Bronny James emerged last year as a guy where I look at the Lakers roster right now, and I'm still thinking, I think there's Bronny James minutes somewhere in there. I don't know if I could have said that this time last year, you know? I think he's shown a knack for development, a knack for holding players accountable. There were some moments where, maybe that was a little heavy-handed. There was a moment late in the Lakers season where Jared Vanderbilt made one mistake and JJ Redick yanked him immediately, like a college basketball coach yanks a freshman. And there was a little spat on the court between the two of them. But Jared Vanderbilt's still on the Lakers. He played in the playoffs. I think JJ Redick is, I think there's two sides of it. When you're a younger coach, it's harder to necessarily have that innate respect built in immediately. But if you show your worth and you show you're a good coach, the players are going to respect you. JJ has been a really meticulous coach. He improved the Lakers defensively with his staff over the season, which I thought was really impressive. Increased zone usage, in a place where zone is becoming more and more less frequent in the NBA. And he said, we have our efficiencies and we have our struggles. Let's try and make it so we can put ourselves in the best place to succeed. And JJ's so far found a way to do that. As you said, he is a bit of a psycho. He is really basketball minded. He cares a lot. And I mean, as the highest compliment, you can tell how much this guy cares. There's that meme that goes around of JJ the day he was hired and JJ during the playoffs, and you look at his face and the eye bags are bigger. He looks older. I think that's sign of a guy who's caring. That's sign of a guy who's putting in the work day in and day out, not getting the sleep he probably needs because he wants to win. Is it something that's going to last a long time for JJ? I think that's up to JJ how long he wants to coach. But I think he's also built for the Los Angeles pressure. The guy has said it over and over again. You ask him about the pressure being around the Lakers, and he basically says, this is me paraphrasing, he said this during the season, when I was at ESPN and I'm on First Take, we start the day with talking about the Lakers, the L word. That's what he said, the L word. We talk about the L word. And I'm sure there's the Cowboys word too somewhere in there. But it's Lakers, Cowboys, and what else are we talking about today? JJ knows how important the Lakers are to the media ecosystem, the NBA ecosystem. And I think he's probably the right coach for that job. It's still stunning that he was the guy hired, and I think for a lot of reasons that a lot of people can point to. But so far, JJ has shown himself to be a really competent coach and a guy that players respect. So far, I think he's had a great relationship with the media as well, which goes a long way in this city. And if you can show up, put in the work, and get results, people are going to like you. Now, without LeBron, I think the tension skews a little more towards JJ. But we'll have to see how he handles that and how the Lakers handle that.
Yeah, I think this is a bigger theme, right? Because I think we've heard it a lot when it comes to the Cavs. The organization, you're hiring people. You're not just hiring a player. You're not just signing a player. You're not just bringing a coach on, whatever. You're hiring the person behind all of those things that allow them to kind of be their best selves and also show you who they truly are. And I think JJ Redick is kind of displaying that at the highest caliber, especially when it comes to going from not only a player, but as you mentioned, a person in the media itself, and then translating that to being a coach. And obviously, he had the podcast with LeBron James, so you have to pivot from there and all these things. So it's an intriguingly interesting situation that JJ Redick is kind of walking this fine line of being a different portion of every aspect of what the NBA has to offer and still walking away and being respected, still walking away and having this level of understanding from every different aspect. And I think it's really well done from JJ. And I'm intrigued to see how this continues, especially in this new era with Luka Doncic being the spearhead. And again, and not to throw Kenny Atkinson under the bus here, but I want to see Kenny Atkinson kind of make some of the same in-game adjustments, the same game-to-game adjustments that JJ Redick has already proven capable of doing, even if that might have been pulling a player maybe a little bit too early or not pulling them at all to give them a little more runway to learn and grow from their mistakes. I think the Cavs could benefit from both of those areas and obviously doing them at the right time with the right player because not all the time did we see that last season. But I do want to get to our final topic of today's podcast, Ben. It's the elephant in the room. I had to save it for the last. The Lakers have gone through an enormous ownership transition with Mark Walter's group having acquired majority control just last year, as you mentioned earlier, at roughly a $10 billion valuation, and now agreeing to sell that stake to Bob Iger and Josh Kushner at a reported $12.5 billion valuation. At the same time, the Buss family's remaining 17.8% stake is at the center of not only a dispute with the other owners, but a family dispute. Jeannie Buss is challenging her siblings. So, Ben, for people who haven't been following this closely, can you explain exactly what is going on, what is happening with the Buss family right now?
First off, I want to say I'm currently filling in on Rams coverage, and every single day I show up to the Rams facility, and the Rams reporters that I'm working with are like, "Are you okay?" Like, you know what I mean? Like every day is I feel like there's something that I'm having to deal with. But that's covering the Lakers. I think that is the gig when you cover the Lakers. I'm gonna hit it at it from a few different perspectives. I'll start with the selling to Bob and Josh. Billionaire owners are the bread and butter of what the NBA is becoming. It's the bread and butter of what American sports franchises are becoming. It's important to recognize that in the current business landscape of the United States, business landscape of the world, that a commodity that always prints money is something that everyone is going to want, and that's why Bob Iger and Josh Kushner wanted the Las Vegas expansion team. And I'm sure when they heard from a little birdie that Mark Walter was interested in selling for his own reasons that are likely, maybe attached, allegedly attached to financial issues regarding his insurance companies. I think it is worth recognizing that Bob Iger and Josh Kushner wanted to get a team, clearly had a plan in place, and now they have the biggest brand in the sport. I think that's a good sign if you're the Lakers, people willing to invest in your team. It's a good sign if you're the NBA too, if franchise valuations are continuing to increase, because that means the next media deal is going to go even bigger. The next CBA is going to be affected. All these things is good news for the NBA. I think next I want to, point to Mark Walter did really start to change the Lakers. The Lakers became a very profit forward venture very quickly. They moved the G League team to Palm Springs, 2 hours away. The G League team was previously at the Lakers facility in El Segundo. They said, "Oh, we're going to retrofit the courts that the G League team was using and build health related tech to help our players recover faster." I've yet to see if that's happening. We'll find out soon enough when I get back to the facility in a few weeks. They were moving media seats. They added an extra row of seats courtside to sell. They were making money. They made new sponsorship agreements. Lakers have a new franchise jersey patch, Albert, a financial investment app. The Lakers girls uniforms, of all things, are now have a jersey sponsor. You know what I mean? Like the vibe was, let's do what the Dodgers do, which is make a lot of advertising dollars, set ourselves up in a place to succeed that way. And now the big question for me is what happens to all of that? Does Bob Iger and Josh Kushner want to do that? I think part of me thinks Josh Kushner, from the landscape of finance he comes from, I think is very interested in profit. So I would not be surprised if the Lakers run a similar operation with him as very likely the largest stake in the team. Now, I think Bob Iger will be more involved with the day-to-day stuff, but Josh Kushner, has the most money in the pie. And so that is a very fascinating situation now. You went from transition from the Buss family owning everything pretty much to Walter owning pretty much everything to now a new group owning most of the pie. And how does that affect the day-to-day of the Lakers? I'm not sure it affects it too much, but it's weird when the franchise philosophy is changing a lot in a yet less than 2-year span. I don't think any team wants the up and downs of that. I mean, just a few months ago, the Lakers laid off a bunch of employees. There was a profit forward initiative going with the Lakers, and now the big question is, what does it look like going forward? Now, the Buss family, its own thing. For you know, was it 48 years the Buss family owned the Lakers, or at least were associated with the Lakers. Now, cold turkey, it seems like there's a possibility that no Buss relative will be involved with the Lakers. I think Jeannie's going to fight this as long as she can. Jeannie is someone who deeply cares about the Lakers. From my short interactions with her since I started the job, she's been at every single game I've been to, pretty much. I think that shows deep care about the team you're involved with, the attachment to her family. However, she's also fired every one of her siblings since 2017. I don't blame them necessarily for wanting to sell. I mean, the tag-along clause, which basically says when a majority investor sells their biggest stake, the minority investors now have the opportunity to sell at that same valuation. $12.5 billion valuation. We're reporters. We don't make a lot of money, but I can do the math and know how much is going to be divvied up from each sibling if that goes through. It's a lot of money. And I have a feeling that this is going to go to court for a bit. I don't know that for a fact yet, but Adam Streisand, Jeannie Buss's lawyer, sent that very sternly worded letter to the rest of the siblings' representation. And Adam Streisand is a very, very, very good, well-known attorney in Los Angeles. And he does work very well. He knows how to get stuff done. And I think there is a mindset, too, of if any lawyer is going to figure out a way to make Jeannie win in court, it's probably Adam Streisand. I think that's a name to keep in mind for the next however long this is going to go. However, my understanding is a lot of people, including ESPN and Athletic, have also reported, our understanding is that this is not going to affect the big sale in the meantime. We'll see what happens at the September governor's meeting. Jeannie Buss is currently governor, so I think that's worth noting. But I think for now, the big sale is going to happen. But it's weird when you have, Succession is one of my favorite shows I've ever watched in my life. And it's weird when you've got real life Succession happening in front of you and you're one of the people having to report on it. It's just it's a weird situation. Not sure it's going to work itself out very quickly, but a lot of the familiar faces around the Lakers are slowly evaporating into the sunset in the way of the Lakers are going to be a different organization, regardless if the Buss family is still involved. This is a new day for the Lakers, no matter how you look at it.
You mentioned the TV show, so obviously everybody knows Jerry Buss from Winning Time, right? And
Yes.
they saw the provocative lifestyle, they saw everything that went into creating the Lakers. But you also mentioned the Buss family has owned the Lakers since 1979. This is not only a changing of the guard if it goes through, when it goes through, but this is going to change how Los Angeles is viewing the Los Angeles Lakers. The Los Angeles Lakers have been synonymous with the Buss family for ages now. Some people, most people, have only known the Buss family to be the owners of the Los Angeles Lakers, right? So, what does it mean, or what do you think it means in Los Angeles if the Buss family's relationship with the Lakers finally comes to an end? How devastating could that be for some people? And what does that mean for the new era of the Los Angeles Lakers, especially as we've talked about on this podcast at length? That this is going to be the new guard with Luka Doncic and not LeBron James. And now you're having a new ownership group. It feels like everything's changing. And do you think it's changing for the better?
I think this goes back to an interesting idea. I'm going to use a really bad. I'm bad with understanding if it's a metaphor, analogy, or a simile, but I'm going to say something that I think will make sense to people. I root for a second division soccer team, Norwich City in England. Okay, they sometimes play in the Premier League. It's like every 4 years they go up and then they go right back down. They were owned for a very long time by this woman named Delia Smith. She was an English chef, celebrity chef. Think like nice Gordon Ramsay. Okay, she did not have ownership money. She had nice money, but not like I'm going to be able to invest money and make this work. So very recently, she sold the team to Mark Atanasio, American businessman who owns the Milwaukee Brewers. It kind of just changes what the organization is very quickly. It's no longer the Lakers, like, my small soccer team, are no longer a mom and pop shop. And I think that is the mentality that's been around the Lakers since 1979. This has been a family-run operation. And I think with increasing amount of billionaires involved with sports, there are going to be fewer and fewer mom-and-pop shops. I think that's the legacy that the Buss family leaves behind. I mean, there are very few front office members that the reason why they had their job was because their dad owned the team. Joey and Jesse, most recently, the Buss siblings, were part of running the day-to-day of the Lakers. Eventually, they got knocked out. But when you're an assistant GM based off the fact of who your dad was, instead of being a basketball player or someone who went to has a brilliant financial mind, I think someone like the Lakers just hired as an assistant GM, Rohan Ramadas. They hired him as their like salary cap guru assistant GM. That guy is an aerospace engineer and became a basketball guy. Like, you know what I mean? Like you have to have stuff that really points to that. And the Buss family no longer being involved is just like a shockwave. If one, that sale happens of the 17.8, or I believe stake of the franchise, if that happens, like, I think it's such a big question of like, I think for better or worse, the Lakers will be taken more seriously, if that makes sense. Like, instead of it being able to, I don't want to use the word blame. It's not the right word, but like lean on the Buss family side of it will be looked at as a business. They will be looked at as the premier sports franchise that they are. And for better or worse as well, that means when things aren't going well, I think the hammer is going to come down a lot harder. There's not much space for failure. And this is not me saying the Buss family allowed for failure. The Buss family was in charge for the most incredible runs of Lakers history ever. Just incredible runs of dominance. But it's also, after Dr. Buss died, it's been a kind of a more than a decade now of turmoil and change. And how does the Buss legacy change? I don't think Dr. Buss wanted his children fighting over the future of the Lakers. I don't think that's anything he ever imagined, but it's the reality now. And then, no matter how you tell the story of the Buss family going forward, no matter how you tell the story of the Lakers going forward, this chapter, the chapter of infighting, is going to be kind of the thing that it will be the lead, if you will, of the story. Here's the high, but the low was the end. And, I think either way, I don't think there's a version of this story that ends with the siblings all still owning the Lakers, if that makes sense.
Well, Ben, I don't think there was a better way to wrap up this episode than that description of what you just depicted about the Los Angeles Lakers situation. So, again, as I mentioned, this is the first episode of what we're hoping becomes a week or 2 week long series here on the Wine and Gold Talk podcast, where we go around the league and talk to the reporters who know the teams better than anybody else. And as we can see, Ben here knows the Lakers inside and out. So I want to say thank you again for joining the podcast, Ben. Let the fans and listeners and viewers know where they can find your work for the Orange County Register or anywhere else where you would like to plug it.
Sure, yeah. You can follow me at all social medias at the Ben Royer. That's Royer. And you can find my work in the Orange County Register or any of the Southern California News Group outlets. That includes the LA Daily News, Riverside Press Enterprise, Long Beach Press Telegram, the Daily Breeze. So no matter what area of Southern California you're in, you'll find me. We also have we're owned by the same conglomerate that San Diego Union Tribune is. So if you live down in San Diego as well, you'll likely find my work in there too. I'm also trying out some TikTok stuff this upcoming season. So if you want to follow me at the Ben Royer there as well, you want to be first to seeing what is said in press conferences, I'll make sure that I'm there to show you. Thank you so much again for having me, Ethan. I appreciate it.
Yes, of course, Ben. Thanks for, again, giving us the inside perspective on the Lakers. And hopefully we'll have you back again down the road when the Lakers are playing against the Cleveland Cavaliers during the 82-game grind. But with all that being said, and until that time, that'll wrap up today's episode of the Wine and Gold Talk podcast. But remember to become a Cavs insider and interact with Chris, me, and Jimmy by subscribing to Subtext. Sign up for a 14-day free trial or visit cleveland.com/Cavs and click on the blue bar at the top of the page. If you don't like it, that's fine. All you have to do is text the word stop. It's easy, but we can tell you that the people who sign up stick around because this is the best way to get insider coverage on the Cavs from me, Chris, and Jimmy. This isn't just our podcast, it's your podcast. And the only way to have your voice heard is through Subtext. Y'all be safe. We out.